Awakened producer Ethan here. Today's episode is brought to you by Infant of Prague Catholic School. Since 1952, Infant of Prague Catholic School has provided parents with the opportunity to give their children an authentic Catholic education. Visit ilpschool.net to learn more about our expanded program, enrollment, and scholarship opportunities, and how you can support the growth of Catholic education in Eastern North Carolina through the Come Grow With Us campaign. All right, now to get on with the episode.
Hello, and welcome to The Prodigal Life. I'm Deacon Harold, and I'm joined, as usual, by Nick and Ellen. And we are here to help you make a deeper, more intimate connection between your faith and your everyday life.
Today, we are we're diving into a topic that I couldn't be more excited. Our guest was recently endorsed by Bishop Strickland for the work he's doing, and I honestly, this is some of my favorite stuff. Ellen, who are we talking to and what are we talking about?
We are talking to Charles Fraune. He is an author. He was a high school teacher. He's had a beautiful spiritual journey, is what I'm going to say it is. But mostly I would say his biggest concern is educating us about spiritual warfare so that we can arm ourselves and our children and bring them so that they can get through what we're up against, because we're up against some pretty serious stuff. And so spiritual warfare is kind of a hard topic. I mean, a lot of more people are speaking about it. Exorcists are talking about it. More priests are talking about it. But Charles actually took the action and started writing books about it, Slaying Dragons and The Rise of the Occult, and these beautiful books. And he has study guides and other stuff. So we're going to get in that to episode 2. But this episode is going to be about his testimony. He's going to share how he got to where he is. But before we go into your testimony, Charles, we're going to have Deacon tell us a little bit theologically about spiritual warfare and what its root is in our Catholic faith. So off we go.
Yeah, so of course, what God wanted from the very beginning, which is established in Genesis 1 and 2, is covenant relationship with us, right? So we exist because God made the decision to love, and that love overflowed into the universe, and everything that exists is an overflow and extension of God's love. And so he wanted covenant relationship. So covenant relationship is a complete gift of self. You know, a contract says this is yours and this is mine. A covenant says I am yours and you are mine, right? So then we have, in Genesis 3, Satan shows up. Well, where did he come from? Right? And so this is where we see the first understanding of warfare. But in order to understand that, you have to go to the book of Revelation, right? Book of Revelation chapter 12 talks about the battle in heaven, where Michael, the archangel, and the word in Greek is exorkizo. So they cast out Satan and his minions, the demons, which fell, by the way, from all 9 levels of angels, right? There's 9 levels of angels. They all fell. And when that battle happened, which is very interesting because Lucifer was probably a cherubim or a seraphim, just by his name. Lucifer means light bearer. So he was a higher angel than Michael and the archangels, but Michael and the archangels prevailed and they were cast out of heaven. And where'd they go? Earth. And their whole, what is their point? Is to destroy covenant relationship with God. So that's where the battle comes in, right? So now Christ, so the worst effect of original sin was death, right? Mavet in Hebrew or thanatos in Greek means to cut yourself off from God's life, right? And so Jesus had to die and then rise to show that not even death, the worst effect of sin, is more powerful than God's merciful love. Amen. Right? And so what the battle is, our whole life is trying, right? We're trying to, our heart and our souls are moving toward God, and Satan's trying to cut that life off. And so we have all kinds of, for example, the St. Michael the Archangel pair, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil, right? So that prayer itself talks about what spiritual warfare is, what it's about, and why we need God's help and the help of the angels and people like Charles writing about this. I talked to exorcists, and in fact, I was just a couple of days ago, I was talking to one, and he was telling me the possessions and oppression of Satan is worse. Now, I mean, in this day and age, they're seeing it just increasing all around the world. So we are definitely in a battle. So I'm grateful for our guest today, Charles, who's written about this to educate us and to help us in this battle for our eternal souls.
Yeah,
Amen.
And I think it's so interesting connecting what you just explained with what Ellen was talking about from Charles's work. We're reaching in that increased activity of spiritual warfare, like we can see that in society. We can see how everything is like reaching this boiling point. Everything is escalating. Immorality is escalating. The brutality of confusion and sin is manifesting in the ways in which we are handling these gender issues, right? The brutality of it, where we're mutilating chemically and physically young kids, right? And all of this is so vile. It's from the deepest depths of hell, and we see all of this spiritual warfare, this activity escalating and reaching this boiling point. And so it's so fitting for people like our guest today, Charles, to be doing the work that he's doing. It's so fitting for exorcists to be coming out more with more information, equipping the laity, because we need help. We need information. We need to understand. We need a lens through which to understand what we're observing in society. A lot of people will see exorcists that are becoming more visible, more prominent in the public forum, and will say, oh, that's a lack of humility. And it's like, no, we need help. We need information right now.
Yeah,
so,
I've heard some criticisms about that, when exorcists come forward, like, oh, they're showboating or they're doing whatever. And I'm like, no, they're
the
not.
problem is they think, well, we probably get into the second episode,
right.
but the thing is people watch these movies, right, that kind of over sensationalize things and stuff like that, and they think, well, it's not real, and they're being told that the devil's not real, Satan's not real, evil's not real.
Crazy.
Because the way these things are depicted in on television and in movies.
Yeah, the reason that these movies are like, there's more and more of these movies all of a sudden, and people are starving. There's some inner part of them that knows this is real, and I'm hungry to understand what is beyond what I can see. And so even though the movies are over sensationalized by and large and they're ridiculous, like people are attracted to them because they're hungry to navigate these waters.
Amen.
So Charles.
That's right.
You're up. It is your turn to tell us your journey, how you got from birth to where you are now.
Yeah, I would say that our Lord just drew me in very slowly. And before I realized what he was doing, I had Slaying Dragons written. And that's how it started. I like to say it was a happy accident of divine providence. So, but he knew exactly what he was doing. And, but yeah, so my story is really, as I said before we started, it was a trajectory headed in this direction from the very beginning. And our Lord knew what he was doing. I had no clue, obviously. But at one stop along the way, I guess it was probably like 20 years ago now, I wanted to become a priest, and I'll get to this, and counsel people as a priest on suicide and depression, on those issues, to save people from that darkness. And that was a very powerful urge based on what I went through, which I'll talk about now. But I think our Lord said, no, that's not what I want you to do. Like, I did not want to go into counseling, because facing that psychological darkness was just a little bit too much for me, because I had some of those wounds. So our Lord said, let me pull you through this long spiritual journey to heal you and equip you, and then help lead you slowly into the spiritual warfare knowledge, which is what he did. And then I wrote the books. So that's a little preview of what I'm about to say. So I was brought up Catholic, nominal Catholic, great parents. It taught me a lot of, as my brother and I have reflected, it taught us a lot of good virtues. My mom was Presbyterian. She converted to Catholicism when I was a senior in high school. My dad was Catholic, and he worked a lot to provide for the family. I think that just took a toll on trying to get us, because I had one brother, and we were tough. I've been learning more and more. We were tough to raise. I think that was very taxing. But with the faith was not handed on deeply. So I didn't learn the rosary. We didn't always pray before meals. We sometimes did. The faith was there. The seeds were planted. I was brought up with the sacraments, but I didn't know how to pray. Didn't know how to relate to God. I had questions that could not be answered. The CCD program was just inadequate. It was a small town, so they were doing their best, but so I wasn't learning. So I hated going to Mass. I hated it more than my brother. My brother left the church. We both left the church after high school. He never came back. I did, but I hated going to Mass much more than he did. He told me like 10 years ago, I was like, do you remember how much you hated Mass? Like he would just tolerate it and just do it until he graduated. But I would get sick sometimes. I'd just feel nauseous, just have to leave the church. I don't know what that was all about. It could have been something diabolical that, because I was not in a state of grace. I should not have been receiving Holy Communion, but I didn't know that either. So from the age of 5, this ties in, So two dimensions: a lack of faith, and then teasing and bullying, which lasted for about 11 years. So from the age of 5 was the first time I had big ears. My dad always said that my head would catch up with my ears. I'm like, and then he said, and he tried to help. He said, "There's always Dumbo. You know, Dumbo's great. He can fly." I'm like, that's not helping. That
That's
means
not helpful.
my ears are gigantic. But they were trying everything they could because I was really, really self-conscious. Like, I think we even visited a doctor one time, and they said, "Well, we could pin his ears back a little bit with some." I'm like,
What?
"So they're that bad?" Like, but they did. I was very self-conscious. Yeah, it was a problem. I had nightmares.
Well, I got to tell you, Charles, I just want to butt in here and tell you, you have beautiful ears. Yeah.
Your
So I
head
think my
did
head
catch
did
up
catch
with
up.
your ears.
Yeah, it all worked out. I'm very proportional now. So, but I had nightmares about people surgically removing my ears. It was bad.
Oh my
It was really
gosh.
bad.
Oh, wow.
And I was teased a whole bunch. So from age 5 was the first time. It was in the preschool library, and I saw these kids down the hall, down the book rack, just pointing at me and pointing my ears and laughing. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm weird because I have big ears. So that's at age 5, and that lasted off and on till I was a junior in high school. Like, I would make friends, and they would be, I was somewhere. It was this weird dynamic. I was somewhere in between the popular class, that whole segmentation, and the outcasts, and I could like swing between both classes. I could appeal as someone who was popular and respected to defend someone who was an outcast, but I would be rejected by the people who were popular because they were popular and I was not. It was this weird thing. I kept losing friends. I had all this great friend turnover. It was ridiculous. So I rarely had many friends until my sophomore year in high school. And then I had like 10. And then I realized something good was happening, that I'm actually somewhat enjoyable to be around. And then junior year, all these bullies. I had nightmares. I had a revenge desire. I had all this hatred. Like, it was bad. Like, I was a big depression, big anxiety thing was brewing since age 5, really. And it was starting to manifest late high school. So junior year, a lot of these bullies just changed. They just matured. Like, one of them came up to my locker one day, and he just started talking to me. I'm like, I looked at him funny. I'm like, why are you talking to me? Like, you're one of the bullies. Like, you don't like me. Like, why are you talking to me? I'm not your friend. I would like to be, but you don't treat me that way. And then I realized that he was trying to apologize. He was trying to befriend me and make up for what he'd been doing. I'm like, oh, okay. So then I reciprocated. I accepted that without him saying I'm sorry. And then I realized people actually like me. So then I changed. I came out of my shell all of a sudden, junior year of high school. But here's one of the things I talk about in my book is the issue of wounds. Like, it was too late. Like, I was carrying 11 years of really intense, deep wounds. So that was my year of peace. And I talk about this in my youth spiritual warfare book, Swords and Shadows. That was my year of peace. Everything was great. But at the end of that year, I turned 18. For some reason, 18 was very stressful. And all of that stress that had been bottled up just exploded when I turned 18 on my birthday. It was really odd timing, but you had to register for the draft. You could vote now, all those things. I don't know why that stressed me out so much, but it did. So I developed irritable bowel syndrome, stress-induced digestive disorder that they could not diagnose. That was not as well known back then. This was 1997, I think. For 3 months, they were testing me for all kinds of things. I was on a no food, like I had a food restriction diet to try to figure out what was causing this. I lost a lot of weight. I was ready to drop out of school. It brought a spike of anxiety, and I didn't understand what anxiety was. Eventually, the doctor said, "Oh, you have irritable bowel syndrome, and there's nothing we can do for you." That was what I heard. It's stress-induced, so we can't cure the stress. We can't stop the disorder. You just have to watch what you eat. Like, really? That's all you got for me? So the rejection. Now it's coming from the medical community. So I just kind of imploded, and I was ready to drop out. So it was a miracle that I got through that senior year of high school and graduated. Because it was a living nightmare, just to make that story short. But anyone who has had that or suffered from those things, and anxiety and depression, it was bad. So I graduated, went to college, and so I graduated, and I completely stopped going to Mass because I'm not at home, and I didn't miss it. That was how much I did not like the church, did not like anything about the faith. Didn't miss it, didn't miss a beat. Went off to the pagan lands of modern university world and just, escaped. With everything the devil offers, I just escaped for a whole year and got like an AB average in college. So I was treading water. I was okay, but I was not moral. I was not healthy. The wounds were just being prepared for a total disaster. So beginning the second year of college, I started, and the anxiety was so intense at the beginning of that school year that I was paralyzed literally for 3 hours before every class. I was paralyzed with anxiety. I just couldn't. I was so stressed out about being in public in a classroom on a university campus that for 3 hours prior to that class, I would just sit in my room, my apartment, and just smoke constantly and just worry. So about a month in, or maybe 3 weeks in, I took a medical withdrawal. Qualified because it was anxiety, depression. I was diagnosed with a major depression, a crippling anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, and eventually with panic attacks. So those four things, I was eventually put on 5 medications, 5 very strong medications. So, and that was by the next summer. So a lot of little miracles began to happen here. So right when everything's bad, everything's bad. I dropped out. I stayed in 3 hours from home. I should have gone home. I stayed in my apartment with my roommates from college, which was a terrible idea. I stayed up all night, just drawing, trying to write these strange poems, drawing these strange pictures, just trying to get out of my mind this nightmare that I felt like I was living in. And eventually I started blaming God for it. So my only prayer was, God, why are you doing this? And why won't you stop it? And I would stay up late at night, just crying myself to sleep, literally for 3 months. It was this bad, crying myself to sleep, blaming God for all my problems. I often saw the sun rise because I was still awake. And I was still escaping by the devil's mechanisms, just to gloss over those details. But so nothing was helping. And the psychologist, she was trying, and here's where the first miracle happened. So she put me on some medicine. It didn't work. I was like, I need help now. I need this anxiety under control. Don't give me a medicine that takes like 3 months to kick in. And that's what she gave me. So nothing was helping. So I went home. All right, before I went home. So in the middle of this crying myself to sleep thing, I had this desire to wear a small wooden cross. I don't know where the desire came from. Don't know who said it to me, or if it just came to me in my prayer, that I was praying at night, yelling at God. I wanted the small wooden cross to be worthless, to be unenviable, to have no monetary value, to be on just a rope, no chain, nothing of value. And never told anybody about this. I don't even know why it came up. So I went home for Christmas about a month later. And then we have this little area in the living room where I would put my keys, my wallet, my watch, and things like that. Came down one morning to just grab whatever, my watch or something. And I saw right next to all my stuff, a small wooden cross. It was disciples mark, and it had been discounted down to like $0.25. And I saw that price on it. And I'm like, I saw the cross and I saw the yarn, this just stiff cord it was on. And I picked it up and like, whoa, like.
Ethan here, interrupting today's episode with another word from today's sponsor, Infant of Prague Catholic School. Since 1952, Infant of Prague Catholic School has provided parents with the opportunity to give their children an authentic Catholic education, one which challenges them to grow academically and in virtue. Infant of Prague Catholic School, located in Jacksonville, North Carolina, near Camp Lejeune Marine Corps Base, has recently expanded and is now enrolling pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. Visit iopschool.net to learn more about our expanded program, enrollment, and scholarship opportunities, and how you can support the growth of Catholic education in Eastern North Carolina through the Come Grow With Us campaign. Now, back to the episode.
What? Wow. So I went over to my mom, who was just right down there, and I couldn't even get a question out because it was just so overwhelmed. Like, what is this? And she said, oh, we thought you might like that. And then I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Okay. So here's where I knew this was supernatural, because my first impulse was, I got to go back to Mass. My impulse, not my parents. I hate Mass. I hate everything. I'm not interested in any of this stuff, but I got to go back because I guess subconsciously it was Jesus himself just gave this to me. He lives in the Catholic Church. I need to go back to him. Even that was subconscious. So I started going back. Now I'm going back. I have a major depression, crippling anxiety, social anxiety, and panic attacks. And I'm going into a public space willingly to worship a God that I had been yelling at for months, crying over how he had abandoned me. So I started going back at Christmas. And then within 2 weeks, so I go back to college about 3 hours away. And within 2 weeks, I go see my therapist. Now, another detail about my therapist was she was an atheist. And she had tried to counsel me that the Gospel of John was not actually authentic. I'm like, why would you do that to somebody who's depressed and was raised Catholic? I don't know. Maybe she thought I agreed and she was just making small talk. But I remember that. So then she's an atheist, doesn't believe in all these miracle things. 2 weeks after I go back to Mass, I go see her for a regular visit. She goes, "Oh, good news. I found this." So she's been practicing for like 10 or 15 years. "I found this old medicine that I've never heard of." Okay. That's interesting. And it has the miraculous side effect, her words, as an atheist, of controlling IBS. So it addresses anxiety, depression, and miraculous side effect of addressing the digestive disorder that I also have. And I'm like, oh, okay. 2 weeks after responding to God's invitation, here's a medicine. So it didn't cure it all, but it had very few side effects. Just made me sleepy, so I had to take it at night. But it gave me a grip on it. It gave me a hint that this could end, and it was coming by God's hand, by God's intervention. And as soon as I responded and went back to Mass with this, the same timing, I wanted to be a priest. Now, I don't know anything about the priesthood. I don't know what the Eucharist is. Never been to adoration. I don't know what confession is. I don't know what mortal sin is, but I want to be a priest. So it was really silly. It was this spark, the supernatural spark that God put into me. And I think he knows everything, obviously, but he knew what I was about to go through. Like the darkness was about to hit the worst yet 4 months later. Like I didn't know that. I thought I was going to be progressing. So I was out of school for a whole year. This is the second semester being out, and put me on this medicine. And then eventually I had to get put on one just for anxiety, and then one just for depression, and then one just for panic attacks. So eventually I was on 5. I can't remember how it all worked out.
Wow.
When I was put on 5, it was too much. And I had an over medication incident where I had a panic attack on a big interstate surrounded by 18-wheelers. And I just kind of like didn't go psychotic, but something just switched off or switched on. I don't know what it was. And I had to pull off the interstate, got lost in these different cities. Somehow I made it home in time, as if I'd never gotten lost, never figured that out. But it triggered a panic attack, which triggered all these side effects from the medicines. And I was also, I skipped over several things because I had told my parents that I wanted to be a priest. And they're like, great, because we just got a call from your friend from college who thought you were about to commit suicide. So it was so bad that he looked them up. So they came over. Yeah, they came over one time, some friends that I had kind of pushed away because I was trying to go one way, they were going the other way, but we were still connected. They came over and we were drinking. So alcohol is a depressant. I was depressed. I did not drink alcohol during this phase because it was a depressant. So I drank with them because other things were not available. And I got super vocal, super depressed. And I frightened one of my friends so much that he looked up my parents online, called them in the middle of the night and said, he said, "I'm no angel," talking about himself, "but your son's in trouble." So they called me and said, "We're coming down to visit." And they came down and they told me about this. I'm like, yeah, it's been bad, but I want to be a priest. So they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So they went to Mass with me that Sunday and they said, tell the priest that you want to be a priest, that you're interested. And so I did. And he just lit up. And he said, let me get your number. I'll take you out to lunch. So he did. He got me connected to the vocations program. So that summer, same summer as the over medication thing, I went to a discernment event with all the seminarians for the Diocese of Raleigh. I am just in all these worlds smashed together at the same time. This really awkward transition from a pagan lifestyle to basically what I'm doing now. It was very violent, very just, God, he can do these things. So then I started to learn a whole bunch of things about prayer and like how lost I still am, how much work I still need to do. And so that next semester I just processed things, went back to school, and then year 2, so a year after my conversion, the second wave of my conversion happened, where my spiritual director, now I have one, who's also the vocation director, who sees how much of a mess I am. He introduces me to St. Francis of Assisi with a movie that it's kind of good, kind of not. Brother, Sun, Sister Moon. It's kind of hippie-ish, but there's some elements that really appealed to me back then. I don't think I'd like it now. But also Mother Teresa. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it has its good spots. Yeah. So, and then a documentary on Mother Teresa, and I heard the terms divine providence. And I'm like, divine providence? Really? Like, really? That's really who God is? He wants to take care of us completely? Really? This was just earth shattering. This is second wave of my conversion. It came in at least 3 or 4, really, stages. So then that changed everything. And I met some guys through this discernment group, and they were like, when's the last time you've been to confession? I don't know. And they're like, I was like, what's mortal sin? I was clueless. So they had to counsel me. One time after this discernment group meeting, we met monthly. I'm like, well, how is that a sin? I don't know what's a sin. So then I went to confession for the first time since my first confession, I think, or second confession.
Wow.
Wow.
And started going to daily mass, regular confession, adoration, like all of a sudden right around Easter because of these friends. One became a priest, one ended up getting married just like I did. And then I realized I have an option. I have two paths. You know, I have my lingering pagan ways that I can keep going with, because I'm still doing those, a lot of those. Or I can keep with confession, adoration, and all these joys that are coming in. I'm like, it's a no-brainer. But to drop this, you know, drop the evil was not easy, but God made it possible. One of the things he also inspired me to do the year before was to get off all those medicines. That summer where I had the over medication thing, I decided I know what peace is now. This was a key thing. Like, because of the baggage I carried, I did not believe it was possible to ever be happy because of how much baggage I carried from my youth. So the medicines, this is where medicine can be helpful. The medicines showed me that I can be at peace. I can feel relaxed. That's possible. But once I realized that was possible, I realized God's the one who wants to give me real peace. I want off of these medicines because they had a lot of side effects I didn't like. And the therapist was like, okay, calm down. Yes, we have to do this in a certain way because you're attached to them. Your body gets attached.
Right.
So we cut it off as fast as possible. And I went solo. And when I went solo, that was right before the second part of my conversion started. When I was just me, no drugs, no medicine, no crutches, just me and God trying to get out of this depression.
Nice.
And so it's and then I thought about the priesthood more seriously, got connected to the diocese with the program after I finished my senior year of college, and I entered the program. They had a pastoral year, and I was still a mess. They could tell. I mean, I was much better, much healthier, but the depression took about 9 years to heal. And that 9 years was my discernment of the priesthood, because I did a pastoral year, took a year off, did a voluntary pastoral year, did another official pastoral year, took another year off, then was sent to seminary at St. Charles in Philadelphia for a year and a half. And it was once I got there that our Lord was able to finish the healing, the final finesse, the final, cherry on top, however you want to put it. And then at the same time that he finished the healing, he said, I don't want you to be a priest. I never wanted you to be a priest. You always thought the priesthood was great, and it is, and that's good, but I don't want you to do that. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't, if that's your will, so be it. And I left seminary through the normal channels. Everything was great. And some of the guys pointed out, like, that's how you leave seminary. Some guys leave, less in kind of dramatic fashions, or they just like frustrations, or sometimes it's not a smooth process. But the final discernment of the priesthood for me was so God provided that other people saw it. They saw how happy I was. I left happier than I had ever been in my entire life, left seminary having no money, no career momentum, no good degree, no clue what I was going to do next, but I was as happy as I could be. And then
But it's amazing that God used the seminary and discernment process to bring you to that point. Like, you wouldn't be the same man you are today if it weren't for the way that God used that as part of your journey.
Exactly. And I've pitched this idea to seminary directors that I know, because through all this, I've gotten to know lots of priests, which is great. I think it's a great blessing. The idea that Catholic men, like right out of high school, they need an opportunity to do something like I got in seminary, like for a whole year, kind of like a gap year, but a gap year in a seminary that's not requiring you to go on to the priesthood, but because there's so much. I mean, we need so much, and this world is so broken. And like you said, like, it was the seminary that finally finished the healing. And I think that's what our Lord was doing. Obviously, it's not. It's the evidence is there. So I do encourage any seminary directors who may hear this, or any priests who are related to vocations, that Catholic men need this right out of high school. They need a program like this.
Yeah, and it isn't even just about the specifics of the formation you receive, which is also huge. It's also about how it establishes a heart posture of willingness to follow God's will for your life, rather than just your own will or what you assume is what you're supposed to do, or what everyone around you expects you to do, but rather that establishing as a foundation for the rest of your life a willingness to listen to what he might want you to do. And that's so big.
Yeah, and the prayer, one of the things that really finished it off was an 8-day Ignatian retreat through an institute called the Institute for Priestly Formation. It's in Omaha, and it
Yep.
from the seminarians I talked to, some don't like it because it's heavily psychological. Some love it. So I loved it. I needed it. I was with a good priest friend of mine, super smart, very faithful, and he and I had almost parallel experiences. And he was being confirmed in his priesthood, and I was being confirmed that this is not my vocation. But it was through the 8-day Ignatian retreat. That's another big thing. There was a 30-day and there's the 8-day. It was because of the 8-day retreat. And as I learned, St. Ignatius intended by that retreat to help people figure out what their vocation is, like definitively. And it was during that, like, I had an experience of the Trinity essentially manifesting in my holy hour. And with all these other imageries of matrimony, it was really, really the most powerful prayer experience I've ever had. And that was when I knew what he wanted me to do. And I went back to seminary for a whole semester just to test it, to make sure I'm not running away from it and running off to marriage, which is the natural vocation. But everything just confirmed it.
I affirm everything that you're saying from my own experience of life. So I also was discerning priesthood. I never actually entered seminary, but I went to seminary for a discernment retreat. And I actually got to do the Ignatian discernment in a really weird way. So I was on pilgrimage for World Youth Day in Madrid, and I was discerning at this point whether or not I was going to propose to my now wife. And I ended up my roommate through the whole 2-week pilgrimage was a priest. And so towards the beginning of the pilgrimage, I'm talking to him about where I'm at and how I've been considering priesthood, and I've done, I've navigated those waters, but I really love this girl. And so he ends up leading me during that pilgrimage in Madrid. He leads me on an Ignatian discernment the whole time, and we were roommates. So it was so wild.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I was just so jazzed. I was so revved up to go home and propose to Alina.
Wow.
Yeah. Praise God. How about that? Yeah. Divine providence, like at IPF, you get a spiritual director for the whole time you're there, and a spiritual director for daily for the 8-day. And apparently I got 2 of the best spiritual directors that they had on staff. I'm like, because I've been praying.
That's what God does.
Yeah.
That's what
So I
God
need
does.
help. Like, I'm desperate. So he stepped in. So then, I left seminary. This was December 2008. At the end of that semester, met my wife 4 months later without looking, through mutual friends. We met on Holy Thursday after Mass.
Wow.
And our first date, I think, was Easter Friday. And then we got married on January 1st of the following year. And then I got to help start, after teaching 1 year in a middle school religion, I got to help start a brand new Catholic high school as the founding theology teacher. So I was there for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was while I was there that I started writing books, the books that actually got published. I've been writing since I was 12. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That was what inspired me to be a writer. I wanted to be an.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you wrote it.
Yeah, I'm the ghostwriter. That's right. I never got any.
So
royalties.
which high school was it that you were the founding theology?
It was called Christ the King Catholic High School in Huntersville in the Diocese of Charlotte. So, and providentially, I heard about the job, and my wife's family lives in the Diocese of Charlotte. So she's like, I'd love to move there. And I'm like, I'd love to help start a Catholic high school that wants to do it right. Like, that was one of the visions. We're going to do it right from the beginning. We're not going to make the mistakes that other schools make. So that was definitely a fight with the pagan culture to launch a school like that. Launching a real Catholic high school, I think, as someone who helped start one and helped guide it for 10 years, is very, very difficult. Almost, I won't say impossible, because God can pull these things off, but it's warfare. Right. You got to be ready for the battle to pull that off.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, so that's the overall of my story, and I can jump back in if you had any specific questions.
So what are you doing now? Are you just writing, or are you still teaching someplace else? Or
yeah, so that is part of the story. So after 10 years of teaching, so year 4 of 10, I realized this job's never going to pay enough to provide for my family. I'm like, that's unfortunate. I explored all the different avenues in the diocese with the school system. Like, I'm never going to make enough money, and they're never going to raise it enough, because they can't. It basically came down to they can never give us the raises we need. So for 6 years, I was looking for a new career. I'm like, I have a philosophy and religion degree and a master's in theology. There's only so much I can do. Like it's hard to learn a new career. That's a lot of time invested. So I tried all kinds of things. I almost wrote a comic strip that was actually, decent. I can draw. I got some neat ideas, but then I realized I was duplicating something that was already syndicated. And then I learned like there's no room for duplications in the syndicated, comic strip world. So like that was a dead end, but it was fun. I learned some things. So we tried all these different things, and then the writing popped up. So because of the success of Slaying Dragons and my lack of buying anything, I just don't spend money, which my wife thinks is great because she's the forms and numbers of the family. I don't like forms and numbers, so she keeps track of the budget. She's like, great, she doesn't spend anything. Occasionally ask for bacon, put that in the so when the time came, when the final moment was like, I got to get out of teaching, because it's really to be a heartfelt theology teacher that really wants to reach these kids before they become full-blown paganized. It's exhausting. I didn't teach in a normal way. I wanted constant interaction, dialogue, conversation, not projects and papers and all those things. So it was exhausting. So I was burning out and I needed more money. So it came to the point where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. But I didn't know what to do. And my wife was like, well, but Slaying Dragons was successful and I had other book ideas. She said, well, you could quit. We have enough money to float you for a year. If you burn through it all, you could just go get another job. And but if you make any money, while you're doing it for a year, then this could work. And then I was sad. Like there was actually, so this is a great story. February 11th, I think it was, the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. I was walking with the kids. We went on walks a lot just because it was healthy. So we almost every class, because we had the block schedule, 1.5 classes. So we'd take them on a walk every class for like 10 minutes. So they were ahead of me and I was just walking. I was just kind of sad. I was asking Our Lady of Lourdes for, various physical healings, mental healings, spiritual healings. Then I'm like, and financial healings. Like I really need a cure for this, for what's going on. And then it was that day that is like this something just kind of oppressed me in a good sense. Like it really got to me. I really realized that I got to get out. I got to move on. Something's got to change. But it was a whole different attitude of it. And I maybe a little sad. So I vented to my wife. And on that Sunday after Mass, I was just venting to her because she could see I was just burdened. I was quiet. I was kind of melancholy. Then that's when we had that conversation where she said, actually, you could quit. And then at the end of the conversation, she goes, actually, I feel very at peace about this idea. And I'm like, whoa, like that's big right there. If the wife is on board with me quitting my job and, trying this crazy adventure, then I think that might be what God wants. So then I sat on it for like a month before I told the priest, who was the chaplain. And every day I sat on it, I'm like, this is it. Like this could really happen. Cause like I have other book ideas. I have things I could do. I can market the book. And the long story short, I think I wrote all this down in my journal. I hope I did, because what was happening spiritually was just it was a God moment. It was a God season. So then I quit at the end of that school year and started doing this full time. So to answer Deacon's question, I'm doing this full time. I'm writing books, writing articles, giving parish talks, doing podcasts. And my income is book sales and visiting parishes, free will offerings, book sales there and things like that. And God's sustaining it. I'm now in beginning the 3rd year of doing this full time.
Beautiful.
So it's definitely a God inspired enterprise, God sustained enterprise.
I'm in my almost 12th year of doing this. I left my career in 2012, and I had a 23-year law enforcement career and left that all behind to speak and to write full time. And best thing I could have ever done.
Yeah, when I look at what I'm doing now and I see the culture, I'm like, I don't think God is ever going to be done with me, with what I'm doing, because of where the church and the culture are going now with what they're struggling with. So yeah, I think he wants people to be willing to just let go, especially financially, because everybody's so tied into savings and planning and controlling. And if we're willing to let go, he has supernatural jobs for people. If we would just apply.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, when you offered that prayer to Our Lady of Lourdes, you said, why her? Was it what drew you specifically to that title of Mary in that prayer?
Well, I think she drew me because it was her feast day.
Oh, and that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Did I miss that? Did you already say that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I said February 11th. Right?
Okay, got it.
But which I think is neat though, because she has so many titles, and
yeah, right.
she picks, she's like, on this day, when he calls upon me for healing, I'm going to throw in, I can heal more than just bodies and souls. So I thought that was just so appropriate for Our Lady. The parish I grew up with is Mother of Mercy. So I always think about Our Lady being merciful and being able to, a tender heart, seeing how pathetic we are, how desperate we can be, and she can acquire all these great things from her son, and she does.
I thought it was beautiful that, it was a decision that you made together, you know what I mean? And that it was, you truly represented like what marriage is supposed to be. You know what I mean? It's an integral part of your marriage. And it really touched me because Deacon had the same experience, and he shared that on another episode that, his wife was like, we need to do this, right? That's what she said. Finally, after a year of discerning, she was like, we need to do this. And you know what I mean? When your wife said you had peace, it was kind of like, okay, we can do this. And it's a we thing because it has to be a we thing. And
because you're one flesh,
Yeah.
Alina and I had almost an identical thing happen when I was running the Office of Marriage and Family Life for the Diocese of Toledo in Ohio. And so it's very congruent with the tension that you were feeling, where it's like they literally cannot pay more than they are. And, we're raising a young family. We're popping out kids like Catholics. And, and so we're running into this problem where I'm constantly having to moonlight doing different types of work. And so there was this one night, we entered this discernment process for about 3 months, and I let my supervisor in on it, and he was very supportive through the whole thing. And then there was this one night, 3 months into this discernment, where I'm in the basement on the computer working, and my wife comes downstairs and she swivels my chair around. She sits down in front of me and she says, "Nick, it's time." And I was like, okay. And the next morning I told my boss, it's time. And he was like, okay, you want to announce it at the staff meeting in 10 minutes? And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, neat. So where did you go? Where did you go to school? Where did you finish? You said you had your bachelor's in what, philosophy and
philosophy and religion,
A master's in theology,
and a master's in theology.
Yeah.
So undergrad was UNC
Master.
Wilmington, and
Nice.
so it's one of those pagan universities, full blown.
It is.
Probably worse now, but then
Party school.
Yeah, and it was interesting. So I was started with archaeology, I think it was. Started with an archaeology major my first year, and then switched it to oceanography because that sounds fun, right? And then switched it to anthropology, and then dropped out. And then so I was making this turn from study of the earth, study of cultures, and then I dropped out because of the medical thing. But there was something happening, like the study of cultures was very interesting, and that's when I took my exit. Everything else was happening. So I came back and I just want to study religion. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand I was at a secular university. I didn't get these concepts. So I want to study religion. So what religion meant there, and this can help build some credibility when people hear my story. Like I ended up studying under a practicing Tibetan Buddhist. I studied Buddhism for a year. I studied Islam from an atheist an avowed atheist, former Mennonite. Studied Old Testament from a Baptist minister from Tobago, who was like an excellent soccer player. He would just bounce around the room. It was great. And I took a class on evil and a colloquium class on evil from the atheist. I studied New Testament from a laicized Catholic priest, as well as existentialism that he taught, where everybody got an A if you tried, which I thought was great. What else? There was one, I took Great Books of the World Religions from a practicing Ogun worshiper.
What's Ogun?
African water god. I never figured that out. Ogun was what the word I remember. Yeah.
Never heard of that one.
How about that? So that was my university experience. And these were all fascinating people. Like I sat down with the Tibetan professor several times, like, explain this to me. Because at this point I was still converting, and like I was bought into Catholicism, but not 100%. Like intellectually, I was still ruling out everything else before I completely gave my intellect over to the faith. So I gave Buddhism its chance to convert me. And like I was going to daily mass and then going to Buddhism class and it was like I had to switch my mind completely because they view the world so differently. They view the soul, the body, everything so differently. But I was trying. Like, let me think like a Buddhist to see if they're right. so much just didn't make sense. But I had a lot of good conversations with him. I feel like there was I don't think there was a Muslim teacher, but the atheist taught the Islam class, which I took right before September 11th, 2001. I just finished that course during the spring semester. So that was a really fascinating thing to be going through as I'm embarking on a devout Catholicism path. But, praise God. So that was UNCW. And then I got my master's, took my credits from the seminary, St. Charles Borromeo in Philadelphia, took those credits when I left and joined them with Catholic Distance University and mostly with the Christendom College Graduate School. They were just launching their online program, so it was hybrid. So I took all this stuff and they consolidated it, and I finished on campus there 2011, right before I started teaching at the high school. Got my master's in theology with a concentration in catechetics. And I also got an advanced apostolic catechetical diploma, which is issued by the Holy See, which is great. How about that?
Wow.
They offer it uniquely there at that school. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Very nice.
Nice little abbreviations after my name if I want to put them there.
And you're very busy because I know you have 4 children, correct?
Yeah. So 4 kids, only one is above the age of reason. And that's tough.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of
and
work.
My office now is in the basement of our house. So when I do podcasts and things, my wife has to be heroic, and sometimes the kids, they stomp and scream, especially the 4-year-old. But we're like, these kids, they're all strong-willed. And we're like, God's going to use this. God needs strong-willed people. So we're trying to suffer to not break their spirits, so God can use that when they're older.
That's beautiful.
Amen.
So, but it's tough.
Do us a favor and hold up the books, because we're going to get ready to go to episode 2. And thank you so much for sharing your testimony. But we
thank you for your
definitely want to put
vulnerability with
those
that.
up. You know what I mean? So that hold them up higher, so that everybody will be able to see. And both of them have been endorsed by Bishop Schneider and Bishop Strickland, which is kind of amazing. And then he has study books and other stuff that we're going to get into in the next episode.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on this episode, and stay tuned, everybody. So we really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be able to get more, and Deacon's going to tell you how you can support us.
Just go to theprodigallife.com, and on there you'll see an area where you can donate. And we have different levels of giving, and we've tied those levels of giving to the hierarchy of angels. So you become an angel investor in the Prodigal Life.
Amen. So thank you, everybody, and God bless you.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe, or even leave a comment. Before we end this episode, one last word from our sponsor, Infant of Prague Catholic School. Visit ilpschool.net to learn more about our expanded program, enrollment, and scholarship opportunities, and how you can support the growth of Catholic education in Eastern North Carolina through the Come Grow With Us campaign.